home of the Emperor's palace, heart of the Imperium, the brightest light in the galaxy. It sickens me. The hubris, the lies, the oppression. No matter. The shadow approaches. The Star Children shall have their throne.
Boom! A fantastic new battle box, ShadowThrone. Eddie, what do we know?
So this is pretty exciting for a whole bunch of reasons. So I think if we talk a little bit about the box set first. So this is a box set which contains Genestealer cults and Adeptus Custodes and Sisters of Silence. It's a battle box, so you've got two armies facing off against each other. One of the things that's particularly exciting about this from a narrative perspective is this is set on Holy Terror itself.
There's something rotten going on at the core of the Imperium.
There is. I mean, many would say that that's been the case for a long time, but this is definitely one of the worst thing that's happened to Terror in quite some time. So a Genestealer cult has weeded its tendrils into the heart of the Imperium. So beneath the palace, it's the ShadowThrone is kind of alluding to that. There is a kind of secondary cult that's starting to rise up, and with uncharacteristic swiftness, the Adeptus Custodes have decided that that's not really a thing that's okay, because a Genestealer cult underneath the palace is bad for a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which would be that, you know, it's going to call in a hive fleet if it's not left untreated for too long.
Yep.
They send their elite golden warriors down. You know things are serious when you send in the Adeptus Custodes, and I think they uncover a hornet's nest. You know, when you lift up a rock and underneath it, there's all sorts of horrible grubs and horrible
it's
things.
Better not to look.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the contents laid out. It looks great.
Yeah, so lots of the miniatures in here we've seen before, but obviously it's great to get them all in a battle box, and there's some stunning miniatures in there. And eagle-eyed amongst you who are familiar with the ranges already will spot two new miniatures. So there is an Adeptus Custodes Blade Champion.
It looks really nice. A very active pose for an Adeptus Custodes model as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. So one of the things that's kind of archetypal of the wider Custodes range is that lots of them are in quite kind of stoic poses, so they're all standing still, kind of on guard, kind of ready to take a charge. This guy is sort of the opposite, so he is definitely mid-charge, and this guy's thing basically is that he seeks out enemy leaders to behead with that enormous double-handed greatsword. And this guy's Adeptus Custodes size, so that is a hefty sword. That is probably, you know, about the size of a man, and probably weighs about 3 times as much. And he's got that kind of really cool, slightly lighter armour perhaps than some of the other Custodes, but looks similar to what you see with the Custodes jet bikes, that kind of style helmet, but very ornate, as you'd imagine from a Custodes character. I think a great opportunity for painters to show off their skills.
So I was looking into this a little bit before we went live, and the Blade Champion sits slightly below the Shield Captains in terms of rank, so think of them as your sort of number 2 leader in a large army, or number 1 leader in like a smaller strike force, maybe a strike force sent down into the bowels of Terror to root out a burgeoning Genestealer cult.
Yeah, a little bit like your I suppose company champion-esque sort of character, but obviously every single Custodes that exists, regardless of rank, is a kind of unparalleled hero across the Imperium, the equal of 100 mortals or even multiple Chaos Space Marines or enemy elite warriors. So this guy he's pretty special. Some lovely little touches on the miniature as well. You can see he's got double-headed eagle pommel on his sword there, which is pretty cool. You've got all the kind of icons of Holy Terror. There's a lot of eagles on this guy. If you like eagles,
a lot of people
forget
have said,
about it.
A bit like a lieutenant. Yeah, that is not wasted on me either. But there are lots of ranks sort of sit beneath captain, so you don't have to be too picky. I noticed that the Blade Champion wasn't the only new thing in this
Not,
set.
so I'm particularly excited about this one. I am a Genestealer cult fan. I've got a fairly hefty cult army at home. This is a Adeptus Saboteur, so a new character for the Genestealer cult, and kind of leading into that. Sits really nicely alongside the rest of your cult in the sense that this is a character who has basically planted their explosives across the entirety of the battlefield, and ready for the battle to come. She knew it was coming, and as soon as the battle is joined, she sets off her various different mining charge and explosives that are positioned all over the battlefield. So enemy units kind of find themselves walking into booby-trapped terrain, or bombs are planted underneath tanks. Enemy infantry find themselves kind of in ruins that are kind of collapsing on them. So in game terms, the way that manifests is she basically has a ranged attack because the whole battlefield is covered in explosives before anyone even starts.
Sounds so fun.
Yeah, so she goes, you over there, you don't know this, but actually you're standing on a bomb, and then she plunges the little thing and the thing explodes. So a really interesting character in the way that she interacts with the rest of the Genestealer army, giving you some kind of hefty range firepower. And she's also got like loads of grenades and bombs and stuff. So if you get really close, she can kind of chuck a
like the whole stick of dynamite and then the grenade on the other side. It's really nice. The chat showing a lot of love for the sort of alternate head, which is one of the really lovely things about this model as well.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about Genestealer cults is you can kind of, I suppose, lean into how alien you want them to look. So you can definitely do a Genestealer army where, if you didn't look too closely, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were just innocent Imperial miners with little goggles and stuff, and maybe just the odd extra arm.
Keep that third
as long as you don't look,
behind.
as long as you put that under the cloak, you'd be all right. Or if you want to have like a really alien sort of look, you can go for the alternate head, which has the much more prominent ridges and also that kind of burn damage, which looks like maybe
too close to one of her booby traps.
Yeah, maybe like in training she wasn't quite as careful as she is now. But a lovely model. Not shown on this image, but she does also come with like a little extra explosive
we saw that
icon.
in the group shot a minute ago.
On the back as well, she's got like mining cord and all sorts of stuff. So a great miniature, and actually, but in game terms, if you're a Genestealer cult player, gives you some kind of reach out and do some serious damage at range, which is one of the things potentially you struggle with currently.
Nice. Turbo Otter is celebrating Warhammer Day by being happy for his Genestealer cult and Custodes, playing friends, and also doing some laundry. Do you know, whatever it takes to
that's cool.
to keep things going.
Just waiting for the Day of Ascension. It's all good.
And Tarascon says, why is today Warhammer Day? Because we decided it would be neat if there was a day for Warhammer Day.
Why is any day any day?
I think the first one was around the time that we announced the new logo for Warhammer.
It was, and we had so much fun, we thought we'd do it again every year.
If you've got a good thing, why not do more of it? Speaking of which, perhaps it's worth pointing out that around the time of ShadowThrone, there's also going to be a new Adeptus Custodes Codex for Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting codex for Adeptus Custodes fans. It does a whole bunch of stuff that Custodes fans will have been looking forward to. So there's a few key things that are worth knowing about this. So one of them is, as you can see from the cover and the image there, the Sisters of Silence have joined the Custodes full time. So as we joined them at the start of the Indomitus Crusade, the Sisters of Silence were kind of a scattered sisterhood across the galaxy. Nobody really knew how many there were. They certainly weren't organised in the way that they were during the time of the Horus Heresy, but they've been recombined. The sisterhoods have been kind of put together back under the leadership of the Adeptus Custodes. The Talons of the Emperor have been reforged effectively, and you can now fit in your Sisters of Silence force alongside your Custodes, and all the kind of synergies across the army work. And there's some extra kind of cool stratagems and stuff where you can have the two forces fighting alongside each other, and they sort of become greater than the sum of their parts, just as they were always intended to be. So that's pretty cool.
It is. Big shout out to the cover as well, because you've got that looks like Trajan Valoris to me. Stonkingly great Custodes hero with an axe big enough to behead all of you.
Yeah, so, pretty ginormous looking axe there. I think it might just be a regular shield captain.
Could be a shield captain.
Could be you can decide. You can decide.
In my mind, until what I'll do is go and find the artist and ask them. But not today.
So there's a few other things worth calling out about this. Yes. I think. One of the other things that's really cool is that at the moment, if you take a shield host of Custodes, you get a few extra bonuses. So you get like some warlord traits and a stratagem or something. What this book does is it really differentiates the difference between the shield hosts of the Custodes. So if you take you paint your Custodes different colours, basically they get different rules in the same way that you would if you had a Space Marine chapter or an Eldari Craft World or a Drukhari different force or a different Tau Sept or whatever it's going to be.
It's pretty exciting if you have gone to the trouble of painting your Custodes force in a different colour scheme to be rewarded with the rules. That's nice.
Yeah, so they now play differently. So you've got much more options, and it's nice as well because you don't have to go too far back before the Adeptus Custodes weren't even part of Warhammer 40,000, and now they really feel, thanks to this codex, like a fully fleshed out army with Sisters of Silence in the list as well. They've got loads of options to play with, and you've got loads of different ways that you can play them. You can have like a very defensive force or a very aggressive force, and some of the different shield hosts lead into that, which is pretty cool.
People have asked the question, could you field just Sisters of Silence if you wanted to?
So you probably could, but I think you'd be limiting yourself a little. One of the things that you do have in the Codex is a HQ choice for Sisters of Silence. So you can do an entire Sister of Silence army. I don't know how effective it would be on the battlefield, but if you just really super love Sisters of Silence, you could probably find a way.
And I think, to be fair, that in many ways reflects the law, which is they're a force multiplier for the other Imperial forces, rather than like a discrete unit that goes off and fights.
It would be rare to see them on their own. Even in the time of the Horus Heresy, they were very much kind of protected and fought alongside other forces. A kind of specialist brought in if they had to go up against a particularly ruinous enemy Psycho force or something.
Well, somebody's just pointing out you might be able to make a great Bastion conversion from the Stormcast range into it.
I think you definitely could. There's a lot of big, shiny, cool golden people that you could mix and match for you so inclined.
Very good. And of course, the Adeptus Custodes are not alone. They are joined by the Genestealer cults with their new codex, and quite frankly, some of the creepiest cover art of all time.
It's super, super creepy cover art. If anyone was kind of looking at the Genestealers, being like, oh, they seem like a nice bunch to kind of join for the uprising. One look at that codex cover goes, you know what? I think I'm going to stick with my current oppressors. Thanks very much. But a really exciting codex for Genestealer cults. I think worth saying. Genestealer cults have been one of those armies that maybe hasn't shone in this edition of Warhammer 40,000 so far, so a lot of the things that are current challenges to them that are addressed to some extent in this book. So there's a whole bunch of things that are pretty cool. One of the things that's quite cool is, obviously, you've got the new Reductus Saboteur, but there's a lot of ways to make a Genestealer army very effective as a shooting force. So there's some rules about if you can capture enemy units, crossfire between two of your units, one that starts on the battlefield, one that pops up behind them, you can get loads of bonuses, so it's quite possible to do a really scary Genestealer cult shooting army thanks to this codex. And one of the other things that's addressed is the Genestealer cult army, I know, is very command point intensive, so you need a lot of command points to make it work. You need to kind of pop out onto the ground and do stuff like that. And some of those abilities now become ones that you pay for with points or power level. So effectively, if it's a kind of pre-game thing, you can kind of, during your planning, as the uprising is getting ready, you can kind of go, I'm going to pay points or pay power level to put these units under the ground, or to prepare them, or to have them better equipped with certain types of weapons, and your stratagems become much more about things that are reactive in game. So it gives you loads more options to play with the Genestealer cults without having to run out of command points by about turn 2, which is certainly what happened to me currently when I play with my army. So I'm looking forward to playing with this codex.
It's nice, and in some ways, it's nice for your opponent too, because you're going to signpost some of the weirdness that you might be getting up to, which I think could lead for a satisfying game for both sides, I think.
Yeah, so they might know, for example, that you've paid points to put a Genestealer unit underground in a pipe sewer work somewhere, rather than it being a stratagem thing. So it's a very different codex. And like a lot of the other codexes we've seen for this edition of 40k, you've got a lot of the weapons and things have changed. There's a keyword now for mining weapons, so a lot of your stratagems kind of riff off that in different ways, and you can do some ruinously good damage with your mining lasers and buzzsaws and stuff like that. It's a really exciting codex.
We are Nurgle's gift to the realm. Bringers not of death, but life, teeming, writhing, eternal life. With the Plague Father's blessing, the curse of mortality will be cast from these lands. Like all living things, these mortal realms will decay. And in time, no peace in Nurgle's garden. Come, mortal children, grand.
So, a new BattleTome for Age of Sigmar, and a timely arrival for many, Harrowdeep.
Yes, so this is the Maggotkin of Nurgle. Anyone who is a Warhammer Age of Sigmar fan will know that Nurgle have been waiting very patiently for their BattleTome. And this they get not only a new BattleTome, but a new miniature. So let's have a look at this guy first. He's, I think it's fair to say, pretty fly.
Oh my goodness. We are looking, of course, at the Rotbringer Sorcerer with 2 heads. The thing I hope is that when that cowl comes up, it's still got fly eyes.
I think, basically, whenever we're talking about anything Nurgle, anything that's like a hood or cloth or anything like that, just don't even think about what's under it, because it's going to be super gross. But this is a really fun miniature. I mean, obviously very in keeping with a lot of your standard Nurgle aesthetics. So you've got the kind of the scythe there. There's lots of kind of nods to flies and to withering. You've got these kind of cool little green candles, which are painted green, which is quite a nice little touch, and bells and scrolls, and a little tiny plague bearer skull for a belt buckle there as well. So looks like
it's perhaps a little more withered than the sort of the typical aesthetic. You know, when you look at the Blight Kings and things, they're quite hench. The Rotbringer Sorcerer has quite spindly arms and like weird spikes under the forearm, and there's a lot of creepiness going on. Super gross, to quote.
Super gross is fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Sorry, Coffee Poo Poo said super gross. I've never quite come to terms with Coffee's name. There we are. This is the world we live in. Also, a big shout out to the scythe motif with the triple bubo at the top of it. If you've got to have a wizard staff, have one you can crump people with.
Yeah. I like to see a wizard with scrolls as well. It always reminds me of old school fantasy Dispel Scroll. Like, your wizard never left home, didn't he? Without at least 1 or 2 Dispel Scrolls, which I imagine is what he's got around his waist there. But yeah, a much more kind of withered look than some of the other mortal Nurgle stuff, with very kind of corpulent, large Blight Kings, which we've seen. So this guy is a very different kind of direction and aesthetic, but also there's enough kind of commonality that he fits in really nicely into your army as well. So you can imagine this guy leading any selection of Nurgle stuff, and the fly head obviously would lead it quite well if you had lots of Nurgle demons in your force, and kind of imagine this guy is halfway on his way to becoming a big weird Nurgle fly demon, which I guess is his dream, I suppose.
Right.
Everyone needs to their own.
Everyone needs a goal, right? And so here we are with Chaos BattleTome, Maggotkin of Nurgle, and an awesome shot of some of the models that you'll find within the confines of this BattleTome. Just look at that collection.
I'll never forget my first game of College Dungeon Bowl. My professor looked me in the eyes and said, "Listen, keep an eye on the Warhawks. I've got 50 gold on them, gutting at least 3 goblins." That's when I knew I was destined to be a pitch side reporter. Those days were something else. Now, the colleges are opening up the dungeons again, and they're going to need some new blood in the teams. And on the walls, and the floor, who knows, maybe you'll be a star player yourself one day. It's like Bob always says, the pitch is where heroes are made, Jim, but the dungeon's where they're born.
Dungeon Bowl was a way of playing Blood Bowl, and as it says on it, it's the game of subterranean and Blood Bowl mayhem. Essentially, imagine that it is a game of Blood Bowl, but played in underground sort of dungeons and catacombs, which are laden with traps and pitfalls and all the sorts of things that can go wrong. Here you see the board and how it's laid out. The principles of the game are still roughly the same as you'd expect from a game of Blood Bowl. Try and score some goals, or incapacitate your opposing team to the point where they can't play on. But there's a lot of nuance to it. You'll see on this that there are treasure chests. You need to run around and find where the ball is, because nobody knows where the ball starts on the field. And then there's all sorts of, you can see there's the sort of lava-filled chasm and a little rift.
Not really in a dungeon unless you've got lava, are you?
Right, I mean, it's very much a Warhammer-themed dungeon. And it is just a really exciting and fun way to enjoy the Blood Bowl experience. I know, having spoken to him as recently as today, I bumped into one of the guys in the team who worked on this, and they are super excited because what they've done is take all the things that were great about classic Dungeon Bowl and bring it fully up to date, ready for existing in the now. And I think it looks amazing as you look at the set. It's a fully complete set. You don't need to have the other Blood Bowl game to play it. And so you've got two teams, and we'll talk more about those teams in a minute because their composition is slightly different. You've got all the dice measurers, the board tiles, which look fantastic, extra exciting if you're playing some Soulbound or some Warcry maybe, and you want to have some adventures underground, and all the tokens and everything you need to play. Whew. It is a fun little game. Should we have a look at the teams? So one of the differences here to regular Blood Bowl is that the Colleges of Magic are sponsoring the teams, essentially. So here you have the College of Fire team, and so it is dwarves, ogres, and then some happy little nobblers thrown into the mix as well. And so straight away, when you look at the different compositions of the team, you're going to get very different styles of play. This is an extremely hard-hitting, not very fast team. Actually really good for Dungeon Bowl. As long as you can block up those choke points, you can roll on really nicely. And they're in the set, and they go up against the team from the College of Shadows, I believe it is, which are perhaps the sneakiest, backstabbingest, and most importantly, fastest team in Dungeon Bowl, with Skaven and Dark Elves.
I think, am I right in saying that the Dungeon Bowl itself happens in the kind of catacombs beneath the Colleges of Magic themselves? So you've got the various different colleges in old school. Old world fantasy, obviously there were 8 different colleges based on the 8 different winds of magic, and beneath the kind of catacombs of each one of those colleges they would have Dungeon Bowl places to play. So you've also got rules in this for the 6 other colleges of magic, so life and death and all the various different ones, but a really fun different way to play Blood Bowl. I think kind of mixing a little bit of kind of dungeon exploration in with American football, which is, you know, a little bit of a weird crossover, but kind of works.
Yeah, and I think one of the things this is going to do is Blood Bowl is a game that is enjoyed enormously by people who like to go to organised play events and have, you know, the sort of the quick games of balanced forces, balanced teams in the case of Blood Bowl against each other. It's very popular on sort of a tournament circuit. So I think we just agreed while we were off camera that everything in that looks amazing, but I'm most excited about the terrain. Let's go back to the beginning. Eddie, what have we just beheld?
So this is Warcry Red Harvest, which is a new box for Warcry, and we've seen a little bit of this teased on the Warhammer community website before, but now the full box is revealed in all of its glory, and it's a pretty cool looking box. So
really
you've got, on the one hand, a force of kind of your kind of classic barbarian archetype, the DARKOATH savages, and these guys are kind of, you know, might makes right, your kind of classic marauder archetype almost, and up against them you've got this kind of super creepy spider looking warband. And I think if you just want a sense of how wrong'uns they are, look at the guy's tiny little arm on the cover. So these guys use Varanite, which is the raw realm stone of the 8 points, to mutate themselves to be more like the thing that they worship, which is the 8-legged spider incarnate of the power of chaos, and they are just super creepy. And then in the setting, still in the 8 points, you have a Varanite mine, which is effectively a chaos mining operation, which is...
I assume the worst mining operation to work in.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. So extracting the raw stuff of chaos from the ground of the the sprawl, to turn into stuff that could be used in all manner of different sorceries and magic forging. But this stuff is super dangerous. So like even the slightest touch of a Varanite can turn you into a Chaos Spawn or grow you an extra arm, which the Spider guys are big into. And we also know from the events of the Broken Realms that Maratha used a portion of this to fuel her ascension to godhood. So it's very powerful stuff. So whenever there is a mine of this stuff, people are after it. It's very important. It's strategically important. But it's also a really cool battlefield because you can like kick people off girders and kick them into Varanite. And if Varanite touches you, bad things happen to you basically.
How good
the terrain is super cool. So it's perfect for a skirmish battle because you've got all these different platforms and levels, and Warcry leans really heavily into almost kind of like gymnastics around the battlefield, so you can like leap from things and dive behind things and seek cover and do diving charges. Quite a lot of warbands have got abilities that kind of, if you jump down from a certain height, you can get bonuses, and you can scale things quicker, and you get a kind of multi-leveled kind of feel to it, which is quite distinct from a game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, which tends to be kind of like 2D across the battlefield. Warcry is very definitely a 3D battlefield environment, and this leans really
the way
heavily into
movement
that.
in it works, it means that getting up on all those high places and leaping from thing to thing, it's going to be a very real part of your game, and will lend to a really dynamic feel.
Yeah, and this is really high as well, so you get, obviously you can take damage if you fall off stuff, so you can imagine lots of fights that happen at the top of girders, and people are kind of kicking one person off the edge, or kicking them into Varanite mines and stuff like that. You get a sense of the atmosphere. The fake smoke effect isn't provided, unfortunately, but everything else on that picture is, and you can get some incredibly cool looking battlefields.
Just leave the toast in the toaster for like 30 seconds.
Absolutely,
normal,
yeah.
And then set up your arms and get shouted at by my wife. Yeah, but all in all, it looks incredible. Here you can see the models in the situ doing their thing, and you get a real sense for how cool they look when they're in place. We were discussing beforehand that the models in this are just incredible, and for me at least, I have a new favourite warband for Warcry.
I think yours might be the other one for me though, because I really like the kind of creepy spider people. They appeal to probably the same part of me that made me be a Genestealer Cults player. But yeah, creepy people with extra arms, for some reason I'm just into it.
Yeah, whereas for me, the DARKOATH Savagers are just where it's at. These guys are the sort of archetypal sort of barbarian horde that might exist in the mortal realms, obviously sworn in their allegiance to the dark gods, and for me that's really exciting. On this page, my favourite is the top right, but you get 10 models in total, so this isn't all of them, and you can see the sort of weapons and things they've got. The bottom right on this page is my other favourite, just incredible.
I think also right in the middle there you've got the sort of sorcerer equivalent for the warband as well, and she is super creepy, kind of witch archetype.
She has no eyes except for the one she's holding.
She's holding the eye of probably some kind of horrible monster creature that she's acquired and also lost her own eyes, and she appears to be some kind of like shaman or kind of witch doctor or something like that. But there's a really nice kind of aesthetic running through this warband where they're not too chaosy, so that they kind of follow the path of the Everchosen, obviously, and they're kind of seeking greatness in the eyes of the gods, but they maybe don't have that kind of level of understanding of the different pantheon in the same way that's maybe the Slaves to Darkness do, or people, the gods are kind of this abstract thing to them, and they're just warriors after strength. And
yeah, I love it. I think that's a really nice aesthetic. There's a few questions. One, somebody said that the DARKOATH Savager I pointed out in the bottom right here is reminiscent of that classic Hero Quest. Hero Quest barbarian, and I think that might be why I'm so drawn to him. Somebody else asked, will there be a war scroll for these for using in Warhammer Age of Sigmar? Almost certainly.
They definitely will. Yeah, they definitely will. So give you another kind of view onto the great sprawl of humanity that is still under the thrall of chaos. Like it's easy to kind of forget when we talk about Age of Sigmar that most of the realms are still kind of under the sway of chaos, and there's all these myriad different factions and peoples that are still, following the dark gods in one way or another, and this is another example of it. And then another example of it are the Tarantulos brood, which are just super creepy weird. So
someone said these bug them, and I thought it was great.
Spiders have 8 legs. The Chaos Star has 8 legs. These guys have put 2 and 2 together and come up with 8, and they have a really different kind of aesthetic from anything Chaos we've seen before. You can see that on the kind of higher up in the the hierarchy, they start to kind of grow extra arms and things, and their thing is that they're trying to ascend to. They wouldn't call it. They tend to demonhood through the kind of apotheosis of the spider and kind of grow extra arms and legs and become this kind of great incarnation of the eight-legged spider god. But they've got a really interesting kind of aesthetic. You've got that kind of net web look on a lot of them. They've got kind of cowled and hooded, and you can imagine these guys are the kind of fast and sneaky warband to go up against the kind of strong and fierce warband that they go up against.
Yeah, nice sort of opposing playstyles would be good. There's a thing, like all of the different Chaos Warbands that we've seen for Warcry, they admire/worship Chaos in a different way. And my understanding is that these worship Chaos as the Eightfold Watcher, which is why this sort of like arachnid thing has emerged. And so it starts to make sense when you look at all of their webs and everything. They're definitely going for it. And yeah, just each of these kits, obviously, you get 10 warriors for your warband, and the subsequent 5 are at least as great as the previous ones. I can imagine that lots of people are going to find uses for these heads in kit bashes as well.
Yeah, the miniatures are just lovely in their own right. Like, never mind making a warband for Warcry, just beautiful Citadel miniatures. There's some things about them that are very different from a few of the other warbands we've seen. So there's a lot of javelins on them. So I imagine they've got some kind of ranged attack in Age of Sigmar, which brings an interesting dynamic potentially to your Chaos faction. A lot of their weapons are kind of multi-headed, so even the weapons are kind of starting to sprawl extra arms and things. But a really interesting, different kind of aesthetic. Quite a lot of them have spider bites on as well, which I quite like.
There's a lot of love for the colour scheme in the chat as well, and the sort of purpley hued sort of skin. I don't know if they have found themselves imbibing toxins or poisons or whatever to make themselves more spidery. Who knows?
I think if you hang out around Varanite and you get bitten by Chaos spiders a lot, that's what you get, that kind of natural, healthy purple complexion.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And
they come with some spiders.
They come with some extra spiders to do their spidery things.
Yeah.
I think if you are not a fan of spiders,
we should have warned them, really.
I just realised these are not the guys for you. Thankfully, they're little, and they don't, except for the spider bases, I can't help you there.
The nice thing about those spider bases is they'll fit neatly under a glass. So if you need to kind of put them under a glass and take them outside, you can do it.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess that's how you could remove them from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In game terms, the way that these spiders support the Tarantulos brood is they're kind of like an annoyance swarm. So the Tarantulos don't have the kind of raw weight and savagery of the DARKOATH, but what they do have is like a tide of spiders that can tie up one of their fighters for a turn and kind of get in the way, get under people's feet quite literally.
One of the hotly contested topics whenever we show a Warhammer Underworlds warband is what is the best thing in it, and I think the Crab has got a run for his money as we see BlackPOWDER'S BUCCANEERS, a slightly nautical themed warband for Harrowdeep.
Yes, so we know Harrowdeep as a setting is set beneath one of the seas of the Mortal Realms, deep in the kind of dungeon that periodically is accessible to travellers and adventurers and all sorts of ne'er-do-wells. And this, a very kind of nautical theme, as you say, a pirate, sort of man-eater, ogre sort of chap, backed up by a swarm of critters and helpers. A very fun, very thematic sort of looking warband, and I think one of the things we're going to start to see for Warhammer Underworlds is we've sort of ticked all the boxes for the major factions in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and you're going to start to see some weird and wonderful and wacky stuff that maybe you didn't expect, and this is a good example of it, including a parrot and a monkey.
I'm all in Team Parrot, by the way. Somebody said monkey versus crab. The parrot is a joy. It's everything I would want in an accomplice.
I mean, if you go back a year and you ask people, like, what do you expect will be happening in the next season of Warhammer Underworlds, not many people would have said Crab is going to fight Monkey under the sea somewhere. But that's where we are. Warhammer Underworlds, a really fun warband. I think, obviously, these models are going to be usable in Warhammer Age of Sigmar as well, so you'll be able to kind of chuck these guys in your ogre army as well, which will be good fun. But just a really, I think first and foremost, the miniatures just look really great, don't they? Like just really fun and thematic. You've got a Nobbler with a peg leg there. You've got one with an anchor and a little wispy beard. Don't know if that's like seaweed or a hair squig. We're not quite sure. Could be. I don't know if Nobblers grow hair, but he's managed to.
He's got like his lovely little anchor on a rope. He just looks so much fun. I think this warband is adorable. In terms of play style, obviously, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to interfere with sort of objectives and just generally be a nuisance with your parrot, monkey, and twin Nobbler setup, while the star of the show, Black Powder, is going to go around and mess dudes up with a huge scimitar and a powerful ranged attack to boot.
Yeah. So there's a few interesting ways that the dynamic of this warband plays out. So the parrot and the monkey both have, they probably got real names, but I don't know. The parrot and the monkey have rules basically that they are followers on, so that they kind of follow either your Black Powder around or they follow the Nobblers around and kind of support them in attacks. And then one of the mechanisms for this warband is that your models can loot the enemy basically to get swag. So you can do that to kind of gain inspired status, or to kind of reload the guy's enormous great cannon there. And he obviously is going to do most of your damage for you, that enormous great sword and that huge great cannon that he's carrying around.
He is powerful. I've just brought his card up on my screen. So he has the Great Cutlass, which is good. Like, that is a decent weapon. But he also has the Grunderbus.
Good name.
Which is, it's not, like, he's a strong dude.
It looks like a Caradron gun.
Yes,
it looks
does.
like
I suspect he's misappropriated it. And once he levels up, he's rolling 4 attack dice with that Grunderbus. That is grim.
I think there's mechanisms around having to reload it, I think, and there's various different cards in your deck that help you to do that. So it comes kind of loaded before the game starts, and you can blast it. And then as the game goes on, you have to kind of reload it, and Nobblers can help you with that, and different things. So it's a really fun kind of dynamic for a warband. Very different from the other Ogre warband we saw, which was much more of a kind of hunter aesthetic. And I think the way that Warhammer Underworlds warbands play, which have like one central character, they've done a really good job in rules terms about even making those warbands feel very different. So it feels very different from playing Molog's Morg, or from playing the different kind of ways that you can...
Do you want all their names?
Yeah, go for it. Give us the names.
So the big guy is Gorlock Black Powder.
Nice.
Described as a brawler. Then you have KG, the goblin minion with the anchor on a rope.
Pegs.
You have Pegs, who is unsurprisingly...
He's got the peg leg.
With the peg leg. So fun. You have Shriek, the parrot. He is a companion, and then Mange, who is also a companion. And Mange is the... I heard somebody describe it as the hairy scorpion, but no, it is in fact a monkey with a knife in its tail. And they have some pretty fun special rules to keep them going as well, including the light-fingered reaction, where they can nick and destroy the upgrade cards of nearby fighters. So.
Nice. Yeah, and you get a sense of how big that central model is as well, with the skull on the top of his enormous great cutlass there. So that sword and the gun are both kind of bigger than a man. So it's a pretty hefty sized miniature. The Nobblers are Nobbler size. So one big cool central model, give you a treat for painters as well, and then lots of fun little characters that can add something a little bit different and special to Warhammer Underworlds games. Yeah. I'm loving the Underworlds Warbands at the moment. They're absolutely awesome.
Amazing, isn't it? It really is absolutely amazing. And as you can expect, they've come roaming in search of treasures. And apparently his ship was dragged beneath the waves by a whirlpool, and they found themselves washed up in Harrowdeep. So there we are. I, for one, think that's absolutely amazing. How are we doing in terms of schedule? Let me check my notes. So, we've got one more reveal to go before
one and a half.
One and a half. I'll take it. Ooh, a clue for what happens at the end. I like it. Let's have a quick look in the chat. It's been flying by. Mostly it was people shouting the word monkey in various spellings, which I really can't argue with that.
It's like being at the zoo again.
Yes, quite. Kodoichi says, I'm not going to lie, I didn't have Age of Sigmar monkey knife fight on my bingo card for this year, but I'm happy to see it. I couldn't agree more. Right. So, should we go for what was the last full reveal? And I think, not before time. We're into the Horus Heresy. So there is a thing a lot of people have been very excited to see for a while. It somewhat completes the set. Raph, why don't you play the video?
very cool. So this is the final Primarch of the Horus Heresy Brotherhood. Jagatai Khan, Master of the White Scars, Lord of the Plains, Master of the Keshig, everything.
He's
Beautiful miniature.
Just fantastic. I'm super biased on this whole topic. This whole week, I've been on holiday with my family, and as we've driven around to various things, I've listened to the latest of the Siege of Terror audiobooks, which is Warhawk, which is named for Jagatai Khan, which is one of his many monikers, and it's awesome, and he's awesome in it. And it made me actually realise that if I wasn't already all the way in on being in the Dark Angels camp, I think White Scars would be my guys. They are so cool. I'm not going to spoil anything, they'll give nothing away, but trust me, if you want to see Jagatai Khan at his absolute, zenith, check out Warhawk. And here we are with the Warhawk himself. It's just an incredible model, isn't it? It's sort of towering triumphantly above a slain Death Guard model. Just everything you'd expect to see. Love it.
The miniature, I think every single one of the Horus Heresy Primarch miniatures has been like a triumph of miniatures art, hasn't it? And I think one of the things that's really nice about the series as we've gone on is we've kind of seen these miniatures come out at the same time. We've seen new Black Library books, and we've kind of seen the story of the Horus Heresy flesh out. And at this point, every single legion feels like a really complete and well-rounded and interesting faction. Whereas I think if you go back kind of 15 years, the White Scars were the biker guys, right? And there wasn't much else to them. Whereas now they feel like this really complete faction with a very different kind of not only aesthetic but also kind of way of war. And if you kind of read the Horus Heresy novels and the Siege of Terror novels, you get a sense of this kind of very different approach to war. The kind of laugh while you fight sort of mentality, but that kind of strange honour that they've got, which is somehow still different from all the rest of the Brotherhoods.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of people said, "Where's his bike?" Actually, he doesn't spend that much time on his bike in the Siege of Terror, which, looking at the slain Death Guard, makes me suggest that this is where that is the depiction from. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things you can see on the model. For a start, the most important one probably is he has the white tiger dowel, which is his famous sword. He puts that to some pretty good use in the stories, and it looks great. But also he's equipped with this huge cape. Somebody says, is it Father Christmas's cape? I think Father Christmas wishes. It looks absolutely incredible, and then his armour is just absolutely sort of dripping with the sort of imagery of both the Imperium and then his Legion. Just a great looking model. He comes on a 60mm diorama base, which is the big base you can see, and then like most of the Primarchs, I want to say all of them, but I wouldn't bet on it, he has a detachable base inside of that for regular playing, I believe.
Yeah. I think, like we've always seen whenever we get a new Primarch, I think this guy is going to be an absolute treat for painters. So a lot of people, one of the nice things about the Primarch is they stand out almost regardless of how you paint them. So a lot of people who are Horus Heresy fans have a Horus Heresy collection, will spend the time to paint the model differently. You know, it's an awesome opportunity to try out like painting metal really nicely, or painting non-metallics, or spending a little bit of time making the face like absolutely perfect. You know, this is going to be the centerpiece model of your army, both narratively and in terms of the most impressive model and the size of model. So it's worth taking time to paint him nicely. And I think it might be maybe worth saying that I think White Scar is probably one of the least represented factions on the battlefield at the moment. When I look at kind of Horus Heresy events and people's collections,
I think a lot of people are nervous of painting white, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's become much easier with contrast paints. Apothecary White gets you a pretty awesome looking White Scar with very little effort. So hopefully, now that you've got a Primarch and you know you've got new ways of painting whites that are relatively recent additions to the range, we'll see loads more really nice White Scar armies, because they're such a cool looking army when they're on the battlefield, like the white and red and fast moving skimmers and bikes and hordes of infantry kind of racing across the battlefield. Just looks really great.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were talking about before we came on air as well is that if you are grey enough in the beard to remember the original short story which talked about the Siege of Terror, the White Scars were one of like the three integral loyalist legions who sort of maintained that defence of the Emperor's Palace and fought for the Lionsgate Starport and so on. And it is absolutely lovely to see them get their Primarch rendered in this incredible fashion. sort of completing that set of all of the Primarchs. We were discussing, I don't know, everybody else in the chat, as it went through each of those Primarchs that has been released, which is our favourite. Chat, I'd be genuinely interested. Just bang in which Primarch you think is your favourite so far.
Yeah, based on the miniature.
Yeah, based purely on the miniature, not your subjective favourite in the lore, just which miniature is your favourite. I'd love to know.
I think this is a strong contender. I think I'm very partial to the kind of Magnus Russ face-off diorama sort of thing. I think those two kind of interplay with each other really nicely. But I don't have a kind of a large Horus Heresy collection at the moment. I was kind of wait until all the Primarchs came out to kind of make my choice, and the scars look pretty strong. So I'll maybe finish reading the Siege of Terror and then see how I feel about them.
Yeah, you haven't done Warhawk.
I'm a little behind. Yeah, so I'm up to it in the series, but I went back and I'm currently reading the Primarch book, which I think is also called Warhawk or Khan. Which is a lot of fun, but that's a kind of pre-heresy, just after he'd kind of come to Terror and been reunited with his legion sort of thing. So kind of reading up on the background first before I dived into the Siege of Terror book, which is all good stuff.
What's interesting is we've just seen loads of answers fly by, and it does seem that the chat are fairly well spread out across the different sort of favourites, as it were. I want to say that there were lots of lions, but I think that's just my bias looking for them. I think I would probably pick the lion, but as you say, I think Khan is... he's gone up so much in my esteem in the last 5 days as I've been driving around listening to the story, so I wonder if I'm becoming biased. Well...
That's the secret of the Horus Heresy, right, is that they're all awesome. There's no bad ones, they're all... they've all got their charms.
Yeah, my least favourite out of the Primarchs in terms of the lore for the Horus Heresy is Lorgar, but his model's really, really good. Really good. Every time I look at him,
maybe I could be tempted. Just read the book a little bit, see what it's got to say for itself.
Saying mean things about Dark Angels in 3.
It's okay, chat. I'll say mean things about Dark Angels after we finish the show to Adam anyway, so don't feel that you need to.
Josh E. McPipes, I can't think of a better way to spend your 800 command points.
'Twas a night fit for gifting, with snow on the ground. The streets were deserted, with nary a sound, while bacchanal revels kept townsfolk in bed. The rooftops were stalked by a figure in red. He leapt between chimneys with shrieks of delight, and a bag full of presents that bounced in the night. He dropped off his gifts, and he left with a boom. You're next on his list, and he's coming soon.